everyone. Today I wanted to show you the basics of air layering as well as two different methods of holding moss in place until roots form on the air layer. I also want to try out a new tool I got from Stone Lantern. It's made by Koyo and it's listed as an air layering tool. It basically just strips the bark off. As you can see, it has blades on the outside and serrated edges on the inside. It's also adjustable and can be used for branches up to about an inch. The tree I've selected to test it out on is a young trident maple. The roots on this tree are bad and the lower trunk lacks any movement. However, I've marked an area with silver that would make a good air layer. I gathered everything that I would need before I started. I'll be using the new Koyo tool to remove most of the bark, a grafting knife to clean up the edges, a pocket knife for scraping, some rooting hormone to apply to the layer site, and some rubbing alcohol to make sure I kill the cambium layer. The camera didn't show the Koyo tool's work very well, so I'm going to show you a close-up on a few different size branches to give you an idea of what to expect. The trick seems to be to not squeeze overly hard when using the tool. If you really bear down on it, it tends to bite into the hardwood and not want to turn. 2 full rotations usually peels off all of the bark, although you may need to turn it more than that in some occasions. As you can see, it does a pretty good job of peeling away the bark. It does leave a lot of cambium behind. That's the green layer that you can see here, which means it still needs to be scraped. The top of the cut would need to be cleaned up as well. It can be adjusted to be used on larger branches up to maybe 1.5 inches. However, if you were using this tool on a branch that size, you would want to make sure that you made at least 2 of these cuts stacked on top of each other so that the tree will be less likely to bridge the wound. This tool doesn't work very well on branches that are not completely round. It will leave strips of bark that will need to be removed with a knife or other tool. But overall, for about $30, I think that buying this is very worthwhile if you do a lot of air layers. Going back to the tree, you'll be able to see that it was not perfectly round, and so I had a lot of cleaning up to do. I will first go over the top edge with a grafting knife to make sure the cut is clean. This is where we want roots to grow. Then I'll use my pocket knife to remove any bark and cambium or the green layer that remains. When I finish with that, I'll use a cotton ball and some alcohol to rub the stripped layer. The alcohol will kill any remaining cambium cells. Ensuring that all the cambium is gone is important because if any remains, it can function as a bridge, carrying nutrients from the leaves down to the roots. The wound will heal and the layer will not produce roots. Let the alcohol dry for a few minutes. Once it's dry, make a paste from rooting hormone and water and use a Q-tip to apply it to the top layer of the cut. This is where we want the roots to grow. Finally, apply wet moss to the area. For this layer, we'll use plastic wrap to hold the moss in place and secure the plastic wrap with some wire. This should be sealed and so should not need any additional water. A lot of people will also cover the plastic wrap with aluminum foil to keep the sunlight from the roots, but in my experience this isn't necessary. Now for the second method. This is for another tree with an ugly base but an interesting twist up top. It's also supposed to be a cultivar that produces rough bark, but I have my doubts about that. In this method, I'm going to use an old peanut butter jar and turn it sideways. I'll cut a hole for the trunk and then snap it around the trunk. It will then be filled with moss, and the top will be screwed back onto the jar. This will allow not only easy removal, but also a port to add water or check for root growth. Since this trunk is irregular, I'm going to do all the removal with my pocket knife. The same rules apply. Make sure to remove all bark and cambium. A good rule of thumb is to remove an amount 1.5 times the width of the trunk where you're wanting to layer. Take your time and make sure that the top cut is clean and all cambium is removed. You don't want to wait several weeks or months for the layer to root, only to find out that it failed because you didn't set it up for success. Rooting hormone has been applied to the top of the cut. I had to make several adjustments to the jar off camera to make it fit properly on the trunk. The goal is to be able to put the lid back on once you've filled it with moss. But now that it fits well, all that remains is to tightly pack in some moss, replace the lid, and wait. Trident maples are fast growers and can layer in 3 or 4 weeks. However, many other species take months to layer, and some, like most ume, don't like to layer at all. If you're not sure if the layer is ready to be removed and winter's coming, you can leave the layer attached until spring. Just try to protect the layer's roots from extended periods below freezing. Secure the jar with putty or duct seal to keep it from slipping, and allow growth freely above the layer to encourage root growth. This layer should be ready to separate sometime in late March. I hope you enjoyed the video and maybe learned something. Let me know what you think down below. Until next time.